live.
Woo, we're live, finally.
We already knew we were alive. Now we are officially live as well. And folks, we are here to talk about 8 ways to keep your people by putting your money where your mouth is. And that's an expression, right? It's basically got to do with maintaining strong integrity. And we're going to talk about ways to put your literal money where your mouth is. Maybe not your literal mouth, although if you're saying things right,
Maybe.
we're gonna be talking about putting your money where your mouth is, both literally and figuratively. So, Yanni, CEO of the Win Woman, would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Aaron, for having me on. Looking forward to collaborating with you all. So I here, CEO of the Win Woman, what we offer, and we have our background in nonprofit and corporate philanthropy, where we execute a number of maximizing revenue techniques for nonprofit organizations through fundraising and intentional fundraising. So that's what we do at our firm at the Win Woman.
Great. Well, and folks, maybe you know me because I do these every couple of weeks. I'm Aaron Schmookler, CEO and company culture engineer at the Yes Works, where what we do is we help you engineer a culture where people and profits both thrive. There are all of these interdependent forces shaping behavior in your organization, and so we help you navigate those interdependent forces and help align them to make your workplace a fantastic place for people to be, and also a place where profit happens, because, well,
That's what
business
we're here
doesn't
for.
happen without it, right?
That's what
So
we're here for.
that's what we do. That's how we can help, and how we can help right now is by delaying no further, getting into the 8 ways to keep your people by putting your money where your mouth is. I think it almost goes without saying that if you don't put your money where your mouth is, you won't keep your people, because you
Mhm.
won't keep your people's respect. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a jumping off point.
Yeah.
And so, Yanni, let's get right into it. What is your first suggestion about how to keep your people by putting your money where your mouth is?
So my first suggestion is going to come in hot, and that suggestion is having a spine and standing up for your people.
Ooh,
And so that is coming in hot. I have to tell you, it's
have
coming in.
have a spine.
Have a
Ouch.
spine and stand up for your people. I will share with you in the background, and a number of you um, might know either are serving on a board for a nonprofit organization or leading these initiatives. And we feel that a lot of times nonprofit businesses are charitable, or they don't need to make a profit, which is furthest from the truth. But what ends up happening is a lot of the individuals who are working within this sector experiencing a tremendous amount of burnout because they are wearing so many different hats and doing so many different things. They are fundraising, they are doing events, they are trying to make their board members happy, they're trying to make the stakeholders happy. And as a leader, as an executive director, as a CEO of a nonprofit, or even as a board chair, it's important to really rein that in and understand that not all opportunities are a right fit for the
Mm,
staff and the team to take on. And you got to have a spine and say no to opportunities so that your team doesn't burn out to the next opportunity.
mm,
So that is, for me, top of mind. And I think at the root cause of why people are leaving, especially in the nonprofit higher education space, why people are leaving is because their superiors do not have the spine to say no to the opportunities that are coming forth and having candid conversations on why their team cannot do this because they are tapped out. And so
mm.
that is my number one: coming in hot, have a spine, and stand up for your team. Yeah.
And so I hear you essentially saying, capacity is a real thing.
Yeah.
It actually is a limiting factor,
Right.
and it can be hard to say no to opportunities. So
Absolutely.
have a spine here is both about courage and about
Mhm.
discipline. Um,
Correct.
And you're reminding me of a conversation that I had on my podcast many years ago with a CEO named Bud. Unfortunately, I'm not remembering his last name, but I remember he told me the story, and this is a for-profit organization of a client who continually mistreated his team.
Mm,
This is it was a high ticket client. There was a lot of
right.
revenue coming from this client,
Right.
and at one, a number of times he kind of gently said, "Hey, man, mind your P's and Q's with my team, please." And
Mm,
eventually said, "That's it, buddy. You're done. We are not going to be working with you anymore." So,
right.
despite the fact that he took a revenue hit, he
Mhm,
fired this client because he stood up for his team. He was not willing to have his team subjected to the abuse. And
right.
so he literally put his money where his mouth was. He told his team, "I am for you." And then he proved it.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I see this all the time. I mean, again, those of us who are involved on boards, or again, or working for nonprofits or higher education, and it happens in corporate too, for-profit organizations as well. But what ends up happening is that stakeholders will be ringing your phone. So when you are in development and you are in a forward facing visible infrastructure, like visible position, and you're the CEO, you're executive director of a nonprofit, your phone is ringing at one. There's no 9 to 5. These are not bankers hours. It is nonstop. You are constantly cultivating individuals, you're constantly on call. And with your major donors, a lot of times
Mm,
there is no there really is no fine line, and there is an opportunity there to set some boundaries. But I think that what ends up happening is that we're trying to pull in so many different directions. The team is strapped. They hear it over and over again. No, you can only focus. You should only be focusing on raising money,
mm,
and yet they're handling so many other things that are not contributing to what that measured priority are. And so, as a leader, it's your responsibility to set the expectation with stakeholders, not only because they're giving you money, but set the expectation of what your culture is and what is acceptable and what
mm.
you will not tolerate. So that's my
I love
point.
it.
That's number one.
All right. Number one, have a spine. All
Have a
right.
spine.
My number one, how to put your money where your mouth is in a way that'll help you keep your team is when you're filling a position, of course, you're setting a salary range, right? That's kind of the standard operating procedure across from company to company to company is to set a salary range. So let's say your salary range is $80 to $95,000 per year, right? That's the range. When you decide to make an offer, throw your salary range out the window and offer top dollar
Mm,
and let people know this is what we're doing. Hey, we sat down, we decided that our salary range was 80 to 95,000. Here's how we operate around here. We don't want to get into a negotiation with you where the first thing that we do together is that we're in some kind of adversarial negotiating position.
right.
So we want you to know we've decided to make this offer to you. We've decided that getting this job done is worth up to $95,000 per year to our company. So we're offering you that $95,000.
Yeah. I love that.
Now I know also that sometimes that range is dependent on experience because the
Mhm,
value that somebody brings may change the amount of value that they're able to offer to the company.
mhm,
Fine. Set that rubric up in advance. So if they have this experience, if they have that training, then the salary is this. If they have this training or if they have this experience, then the salary is that. And here's the kicker, when they come in and you say, well, based on your level of experience and training, we're going to offer you 80,000. And
mhm,
we were ready to offer 95,000 to somebody who had this training or this experience. If you had 3 more years of experience, we would be giving you $95,000. If you had this training and 3 years of experience,
right.
we'd give you $95,000. So here you are. This is day 1. The offer is 80,000. If you get this training and you add 3 years of experience, your salary will be $95,000 adjusted for inflation or whatever,
Mm.
so that they know on day one when you make the offer, you're offering 80,000 today and 95,000 when you reach the criteria that would have earned them $95,000. Now, since we're talking about keeping your people, just imagine getting an offer like that.
Absolutely. I mean, culturally, the expectations it sets. I mean, I'll share with you. So, what made me a great fundraiser and what makes me and what we do within strategy and everything else was owning in on negotiation skills, right? And one of the things that I realized so very, very blatantly is the fact that, and I tell this to everyone that I teach and I coach negotiation to, pay very, very close attention to how they're treating you when you are in the door, in the sense of in the process of an interview. How what's that process looks like? Are they, how is it disorganized? Or do they look at their, like they know that they're what they're talking about? Like, what does that feel like, right? If it's too much of a back and forth, or they're not giving you right answers, or not being clear, that is going to be a direct reflection of exactly what you're going to experience inside of the company culture. So if you told me at the beginning of you coming on, and I'm signing on and I see the range, and you tell me, look, here's where we see you, and when you're getting this credentialing with us, this is where you'll be. First of all, you're already setting the expectation of what our process is, but more importantly, how we award progress within our company. And number
The
two, you're able,
transparency.
right, transparency. And that's the first thing that becomes so apparent in the way that owning that beginning process of onboarding doesn't start when you offer the letter. It starts when you are interviewing. Your
Yes.
people being disorganized, your people being not owning that process, you're starting to lose people from the beginning. And so vice versa, when you are going out for a job, and right now it is not an employer's market, it's an employee's market,
That's right.
period. It is. People have options on where they can go and where they can be. So
And
you
it's
have to be
always a
competitive.
top talent market, right? I mean, if you're top
Exactly.
talent, it's always your market.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if you
Exactly. I
want
love
top
that.
talent, pay attention to what Yanni is saying here. And I'm so glad that you brought up when onboarding starts. I even think onboarding starts when your candidates read your
Mhm.
job posting,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Absolutely. Way before.
What are the
Yes.
words that you're using? How are you describing your company and this job? That's when
Hmm.
onboarding starts. And
Yeah.
so when people apply to your job, now we're getting off field a little bit, right? But
I
when
know, right?
people apply for a job in your company and they don't hear peep ever, that affects your brand as an employer.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Enough
Communication.
of
We can
this.
harp on. I'm like, we can harp on
Yeah.
very much
Yeah.
hiring processes
All right.
for
So
companies.
let's rein it in,
Yeah.
and Yanni, let's get to your second suggestion.
Yes, absolutely. So my second suggestion is be conscious about how you're delivering feedback to
Mm.
your to the ones that you oversee, your team, and that sort of thing. I recently came across, and I put this on here because I recently came across working with a client, and they had asked me, well, there is this talk of favoritism. We were doing a company wide training, and they had multiple satellite locations. And every group, essentially the managers of each location, were in charge of your own team and their staff and that sort of thing. And then some of the times the employees would be complaining about, oh, well, you pick favorites, or you pick whatever it is. And here's the thing, and this is gonna be a a lot of you are not going to like me about this, but I'm going to tell you something. As an only child, because I am an only child, I have cousins and things like that I serve as my siblings and things growing up. But you're always going to have a favorite. I'm going to just say it here. You're going to have a favorite in the workplace. More importantly, you're going to pick favorites. But with that, There's always going to be people that you get along better with or you connect better with. That is not something that you can avoid. And I'm not asking you all to avoid it either. What I'm sharing is, how are you consistently providing feedback for the employees that you have or the people that you're overseeing and you're supervising? How are you ensuring that you are being consistent? Are you only providing negative feedback to the ones that maybe you don't connect as deeply with? And if so, that is hurting your reputation and really fostering that environment of, oh, it's very cliquey, or it's very, I feel outcasted. So I think being intentional about how you're showing up to supervise your employee base is important in retention of talent.
Mm. Mm. Good stuff,
Mhm.
Yanni. I think it's going to have resonance with some of my later points.
Yeah.
And the appearance of favoritism.
Mhm.
I mean, what do they say? I'm kind of lost the expression, but perception is reality. That's the
Right.
expression, right?
Right.
So it doesn't matter nearly as much whether you actually are engaged in favoritism as it
Mhm.
matters whether you appear
To
to be
be.
engaged in
Mhm.
favoritism. And so, and Yanni, I'm guessing that you would agree with me that there's nothing wrong with favoritism when it comes to favoring somebody for a role,
Of
a
course.
favoring somebody for a project when
Mhm.
when that favoritism has been earned,
Correct.
so that you
Correct.
can be transparent about here's how you get to earn these privileges around here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even so, the background that I come from a very robust background in sales as well. And we had metrics and scorecards, and we had bonuses
Right.
and luxury vacations that came into play as it related to our individual performance. But that wasn't a very much clear expectation of, if you hit this, you'll get this. And it's very much measured and transparent about that. I think almost like a point 2A for my point for what I'm sharing today is, make sure that you're not moving the target. Also,
Yeah.
if you're talking about a goal that your team needs to measure, just because now one of these other employees that maybe are less favored can't hit it, now you're moving that target to make it harder. So
Yeah.
I think that
Bad form.
moving targets is what also leads into that culture of favoritism or not, or
Absolutely.
the way that you provide help. So yeah.
Right. And that goes back to when I was saying, if you're going to lay out a rubric, right, that
Correct.
for
Mhm.
attaining a certain salary,
Right.
don't change the metrics,
Mhm.
because then you're not putting your money where your mouth is. That is not integrity. And I define integrity as a consistency of thought, word, and action, right? It's not
Absolutely.
about doing the right thing. You can be evil and have integrity. Um,
That's so interesting. That's a totally different topic of being evil and having
yeah.
integrity. That's a really interesting thing.
Um, uh, you know what? To bring this into another concrete example, Yanni, you mentioned being in sales, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about a company that we worked with where one of their salespeople was telling me about the fact that he's in the president's club, right? He is a top performer in his organization. He
Mhm.
delivers above and beyond what other people do. He delivers above and beyond what his quota is. And
Mhm.
still, they require that he come in every day at 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. so that he can spend half an hour on the phone from the office. And despite his having said, look, this is interfering with my ability to bring revenue in the door. This
Right.
is not the best use of my time. So if somebody gets to X or Y performance, it might be a good idea at that point to say, okay, you get to use your judgment about how you spend your time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it also comes with like, this would be an interesting conversation just generationally, to talk about what this looks like generationally and some of the expectations that, as we are seeing Generation Z, but more importantly, Alpha, that's about to come into the workforce. what their level of expectation are for flexibility. I mean, this is a totally different topic, but I say that because it goes back to the thought of mind of, seasonality, right? If you're seasoned and you almost like have earned your stripes
Mhm.
to be able to, afford whatever it is, there's trust. Essentially, at the end of the day, earning your stripes is trust. So it's a matter of the trust that is built upon. But again, is everybody starting at the same place? Number one. Going back to favoritism, is everybody starting at the same place? And are you providing the support for those that haven't? And or are you favoring one or the other? So being consistent with the feedback that you're providing with your teams is what is going to help you build the loyalty and the retainment.
Excellent. All right. My second suggestion for how to put your money where your mouth is invest in training and development for your people.
That's one
Now,
of mine.
awesome, right? So
You
we
totally
agree.
took it. You
We
totally took
agree.
it. Yeah.
So, and investing in training and development is not just a formal thing, right? Although giving people money to go get training or buying them training, that's
Yeah.
one form.
Right.
Another form of training and development that I think is really often overlooked is letting people make costly mistakes.
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
So if, for example, you're a leader and you see somebody heading for a cliff, do you intervene? And in what way do you intervene? To take away their freedom of choice, right? Their authority to make decisions. Well, one of the questions you can ask yourself is, how did I get to have the judgment so that I can see that cliff that they aren't seeing?
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
every time I ask that question of a leader, they say, "Well, I trial and error. I made a lot of mistakes." There's nobody who almost nobody says to me, "Well, I had a mentor who intervened and got in the way before I could fall off that cliff."
Right.
They fell off the cliff and they said, "Oh, I'm not going to do that again."
Mhm.
So if you ask yourself, what is the cost of allowing them to fall off the cliff? And then compare that to the cost of if you could fork over some cash
Mhm.
and give them the judgment that would come as a result of falling off that cliff. Well, do that cost benefit analysis.
Right.
And if it's going to cost less than you would invest to give them the judgment, then let them fall off the cliff.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And
I love that you're sharing
that's
that.
part of training and development.
It totally is. And I also, so I, long time ago, I had done a training with the Ritz Carlton and customer service excellence, and I was fascinated by their cultural model, and their whole slogan is "Ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen."
Mm.
Right? It's a beautiful model of the way that they do things, and one of the things what I loved, there was a very very tactile thing that I was encouraging the way that we serve our clients, but also the teams I've managed in the past, was that they would enable their service members, everyone from the company. Now, granted, I'm not sure if it's changed or whatever. This has been like almost 10 years since this training. However, they would enable their service members to. They had each an individual budget. One of their pillars was about how to surprise and delight essentially their customers or their guests specifically, and they had individual budgets on how to make it more spectacular, right? So it would be discretionary funding that they would give to their employees. And so if they overheard a guest that maybe left a belt or something like that, then they could, out of that budget, go and buy that for that guest and make it, again, surprise and delight. But I love the opportunity for team members to have the autonomy to fail in a safe space, but also to surprise and delight as well. And so that's something that I thought through when, as you were talking, was how are you enabling that piece for your team? And I have to tell you though, as a very, very controlling, I have unlearned the levels of control. It's so hard, right? When you see the train wreck coming, it's so
Oh,
hard not to just be like, I'm so sorry, goodbye, and just like driving because you know exactly what to do. It's just what happens is if you do that, they will rely. There would be times that they will rely on you doing that, right?
Mm.
They will rely on you coming in, stepping in, and taking care of it for them, right?
Yes.
So it's almost like they're like, oh, I'll handle it to this point, because at this point it also fosters two things. They don't trust me to handle it any further, and number two, oh, I'll just kind of take a step back because I know that Yanni will handle it, because she'll step in. She's a control freak, and she'll step in and have to handle it.
That's
So
right.
it's such an affirmation to hear you tell me again as
I have,
well.
I
Tell me
have
again.
leaders. I have leaders every week ask me, how can I get my people to stop asking me so many questions about
Right,
how to handle things?
right,
Like, I want
right.
them to use their own judgment. And I say, well, when they come to you to ask you what they should do about something, what do you
Mhm.
say?
Right.
And they say, well, I answer their question, and then I tell them that I want them to use their judgment in the future. So my answer is, stop doing that.
Right,
Eliminate
exactly.
that
Well, what would
first
you do
part.
then? Right,
Eliminate that first
absolutely.
part and say, I'd like you to use your judgment
Right. Like,
right
what would
now.
you do in this situation?
Yeah.
How would you handle this? And I think, again, it's a growth opportunity. And I'll tell you, as a person that knows how to do, when you know how to do it and you see the train wreck coming, you almost have to brace yourself for the impact,
Yep.
right? You just like that safety emergency. I remember thinking about. I remember the movie, but it was like that landed on the Hudson River. I mean, it was an actual story.
Mhm.
That the plane that landed on the Hudson. And I remember brace for impact. I would used to come into one of my boss's offices at one point before I already had the solution, but I used to say to her, okay, well, I just want to let you know, I need you to brace for impact. And so we would literally do the motion before I would tell her whatever the next step to that is,
I love
to
it.
preface it. But again, it's a matter of how you foster that environment. Yeah.
Yeah. My second point was invest in training and development. I'll just give
Mhm.
really quickly a quick story too about how that keeps people around. One of the ways that
Mhm.
that keeps people around. There's what's this the I'm sure you've seen some of these memes. The CFO says,
Mm,
what if we invest in training for this employee and they leave? And the
right.
CEO responds, what if we don't and they stay? Right. So there's
Mhm.
that. And I remember the first job that I had after college, working for uh, a national corporation. And one of the first things they did was to fly me from San Francisco to the corporate headquarters in Irvine, California, put me up in a really nice hotel,
Mhm.
got 3 days of intensive training, some
Mhm.
directly with the CEO. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, they really are investing in me. It
Right.
was my first experience of an employer really investing in me. And
Mhm. Mhm.
the sense of loyalty that bred was
Right.
not to be dismissed.
Right.
All right, so
Absolutely. And
go
sorry,
ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, well, I feel like I think we can just, since we've just merged both of ours, because that literally I have invest in professional development. And just so that
Uh-huh.
everybody knows here, we didn't know each other's points. So we just had to come onto this table and talk about our 4 points, but we didn't know each other's points. So I will just, as a or as one of my next points, which is the invest in professional development, I will just say, pay attention to cues of what your team um, sees, how they see themselves in the future, right?
Mm,
I think about, I have a team member who is my absolute rock as it comes to project managing our nonprofit clients. And I know she is a CRM ninja. I mean, that's what she does. She comes in there, she sees the data, she knows the trends, like she sees this. And I immediately, knowing that this is the field that she enjoys and likes, I said to
mm,
her, you know, why don't you take a look into getting Lean Six Sigma certified, in project
mm,
management, black belt? What does that look like? Or if we need to get you certification in the CRM systems that are now latest trending, let's invest in that, because I want you to, as also to speak with authority. We are certified in these things, and that you own that piece. I don't need to have all the
yeah.
certifications. you can surround yourself with people that are the experts in that. So that's all about, obviously, investing in your team with their credentialing and professional development too.
Right. Well, and I'll since we've kind of folded ours together,
Yeah.
I'll say too, another way of looking at this. I have weekly one-on-ones with everybody who reports to me, and so should you.
Mhm.
So should you. Um, and every 2 or 3 weeks, I'm asking, where do you see yourself?
Mm,
Where do you want to end up? And I remember
right.
with my executive assistant, the first time I asked her that question in the maybe the second week of her employment, she said, "I eventually want to have my own uh, remote assistant company."
Mm,
So there's, speaking of invest, what if we invest and they leave, right? I mean, she's telling me
right. She's
straight up,
telling you what she
I
wants.
want to
Right.
leave.
Right. Right.
Awesome. So then one of her first long-term assignments was 2 or 3 weeks from now. And I probably said 3 weeks from now, I want a comprehensive list of all of the skills that you need to develop, that
Mhm.
you know now that you need to develop in order to be successful at that. And then she knew that I was giving her assignments because I said, "Okay, here's an assignment that I want you to do. It's going to help you develop this skill that's on your list." So she knows precisely how I am building her capacity to
Mm,
succeed at what she wants to succeed at. I'm
absolutely.
investing in her future. And now ask yourself, you viewer and listener, because we're talking about 8 ways to keep your people, and I'm telling you how I can develop her 5 years from now to be gone.
Right.
If you have that goal and your employer every couple weeks is saying, "Okay, how do we develop the next skill that you need to succeed at
Mhm.
what you want to do?" Are you ever going to leave? What would it take to get you away from the job that is deliberately and systematically building you toward the future that you want to have?
I love that. I think that well, one, it breeds loyalty. What this is the art of how to create loyal employees, and not just that. That's what retention is. How do
Yeah,
you create loyalty, and how do you there? It's taking that actual genuine interest in the individuals that are working for you and validating the work that they actually bring to the table, but also showcasing how understanding what it is that it's let's be real right now. There is not an infrastructure or work life setup for the incoming generations in the workforce where they're going to be working at one place for their entire life. That's just unrealistic. If you think that your employees are going to be doing that, you are, you're living in a fantasy land. You really are. And it's a matter of how you invest in them right now to be able to then retain them. And you know what? I'm sure you can squeeze out more time, more years because of that loyalty
right
that
on.
breeds in that. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. By the way, folks, if you are sending us stuff in the chat, it's not appearing for us. Usually we see some chats. So sorry if you're asking us questions that we're not
Yeah.
answering. Okay, my third suggestion.
Mhm.
The third suggestion out of four for me and Yanni, I know you've got one more. My third suggestion is ensure that your policies are congruent with your values, with your state, especially with your stated values. So to give you an illustration of what I'm talking about and the profundity with which this is often not the case. I worked with a company that stated as one of its core values trust, right? Our core value is trust. And then looking through their employees' handbook, it said essentially, when you get back from bereavement leave, in other words, when you come back to the office from your mother's funeral, please bring an obituary or a death certificate. So this is a kind of a blatant example of where policies and values are not congruent. I mean, how much distrust do you have to have for your employee to require that they prove that they were away on bereavement leave when they claim that they were? And if there weren't, I mean, who cares? Like at some level, who cares? Somebody who's that dishonest, it's going to come out in other ways. How dare you
Right.
require of them that they prove that they are actually grieving while they're grieving? It's gross. And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
call the situation gross rather than the behavior of these leaders gross, because what happened was they bought an employee handbook, right? They
Mm-hmm.
didn't sit down to write out these policies. They bought an employee handbook and they didn't scrutinize it. But it's fairly common that some of the things that are this egregious are fairly common. And then what's really common is speaking. You were talking earlier, Yanni, about the appearance of favoritism. I had a
Mm-hmm.
CEO working with me who told me that his employees said he was engaging in favoritism because he was making exceptions to the rules for someone. Now,
Mm-hmm.
he made exceptions to the rules for someone because in the situation that they found themselves in, he just couldn't imagine not making exceptions for her.
Right.
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 So that's not it. You will likely appear to be giving somebody favoritism if you're making exceptions to the rules. And the reason he had to make exceptions to the rules is that the rules in some ways did not match his values and the values of the company.
Mm.
So if you want to not appear, part of my guidance for him was a great way to respond to these folks would be to say, I can see why it looks that way. I have made exceptions to the rules that
Mm-hmm.
apply to you. And so, of
Right.
course, it would appear as favoritism. Here's what we're going to do about it. I'm going to change the rules.
Right.
I'm going to change the
Right.
rules
Right. And
so
I think
that you
not
no
being
longer
afraid.
have to worry about, is this, how am I going to be treated in that situation? You will
Right.
know because it's been codified. We've aligned our policies with our values.
Absolutely. No, I love that you shared that, but I also think that it's becoming, I think a lot of the trend of what we've just talked about overall has to do with consistency.
Yeah.
It just consistency is the overall arching piece. And
Yep.
when there is no consistency, when there aren't these parameters in place, when there are always moving targets, then it becomes really easy to get disenfranchised, disenchanted about the workplace environment, not feel supported by those that are leading you, right? It
Yeah.
becomes that,
Yeah.
and you're creating that kind of almost hostility amongst, and this undercurrent
Hmm.
of, oh, well, I guess I have to just figure it out. I mean, I have um been in several situations, and this goes back to development and sales, right? In the background that I have, there's been several situations where I've been in a sales role or even a development role in the fundraising world, where it's like, all right, here's your list of prospects, and here are their target. This is their wealth management rating, and this is where they're sorted by geographic locations. Go, like, and I was like, oh, okay, great. I guess just go. I mean, thankfully so Aaron and I, I'm not sure if you all have ever taken Colby, but Colby A, Aaron, I think we have the same exact,
Almost the same.
same exact numbers. But in Colby, I'm very much a quick start. So sales and doing that comes very naturally and easy to me. But what ended up happening was that, well, you first start thinking to yourself, well, I guess I'm going to just have to create it as I go. I am literally the epitome of what it looks like to build a plane as you're flying it. Like, that's
Mm,
exactly what I'm operating in all the time. And I just think it's not the environment that is sustainable for people to not have an infrastructure.
mm.
Oh yeah, what do? You just create relationships and you just close deals, and that's what you do. And yeah, that might come naturally to me, but to people who have never known the process or how the internal workings of the organization, it becomes very frustrating very easily, and not having that consistency around that.
All right. So, Yanni, before we get to your fourth and final suggestion,
Mhm.
uh, who might want to get in touch with you, and how can people reach you?
Absolutely. So for us, and a lot of times when our clients seek us out as it relates to fundraising or corporate foundation philanthropy strategy, it's because either they're in need of some kind of system where they need a recurring revenue source. Maybe they are heavily events driven, and that's the only way of
Mm,
fundraising that they might know of, and they want to diversify their revenue sources. So
mm,
they reach out because they're like, you know what, we're really tired of doing this, or we're highly dependent on government grants, or XYZ just seed funder. That's a way that they can reach out to us, and a problem that we're actively solving for. When they're needing a board management or activation in the way that they're utilizing their board members and strategically um, v- increasing their visibility in their own communities and nationwide, we develop strategy and executable deliverables on that end. And so for us, it's very easy. You can, I'm on LinkedIn. You can certainly shoot me a note. My website's easy. It's thewinwoman.com. And you can always shoot me a note at hello@thewinwoman.com. And I'm easily reachable, and we'll respond with us having our first conversation, which would be a right fit conversation. So that's how you can reach me and what we do.
terrific. Thank you, Yanni. What is your fourth and final suggestion for folks about how to keep your people by putting your money where your mouth is?
So I would say the fourth and final suggestion is clear the way of obstacles.
Mm,
Is my fourth and final suggestion, and that really relates to, it almost parlays into that first suggestion of having a spine and standing up for your team. But this is clearing the way of obstacles. And if you all have never read the book Traction, it's definitely one of my favorites. I literally keep it on my desk. I have it here. So Traction.
that's
But
the EOS book.
yes, yeah, an entrepreneur operating system. We implement it in our business, and we help our clients implement it in their organizations. But the reason I speak to Traction and what they do is because they always say that, with the CEO, they usually have two defining people within the organization. You have a visionary and you have an implementer. For a
Mm,
long time, on my end, I'm grateful to be a visionary within my own business, and I have an incredible implementer. But what happens is the implementer can't implement if they're don't clear the way of obstacles. So I'll share this in bigger, larger organizations, higher education institutions, corporations, what have you. There's a lot of internal bureaucracy that needs to happen. So if you're trying to fundraise, well, if you're a larger organization like a higher education institution, there is a lot of competition naturally, with different colleges or different, sectors or that sort of thing. And there's a highly political environment. The larger the organization, the more political it is. It's just the nature of the beast when you're in sales or when you're in nonprofit fundraising. And a lot of times I remember that, in working in those systems, my superior, my boss, for rather, I would tell her and I would say, hey, I just need you to do the politicking for a second so that I can go raise the money. So can you
mm,
just clear the way here of this is the corporation, or this is the donor that I want to reach out to, and they are like we have a CRM system, and they were like the assigned manager to that person, right? But I already had the deal almost closed, and everybody was in the loop, but people were going to get pissed off or whatever it is because they weren't cut into the deal, right? So I said, can you just do your thing in politicking in whatever you need to do so that I can go and close this? And that was the working dynamic, right? It was the clearing the way of the obstacles. And
mm,
you all have your own set of obstacles internally. I will say that politics and internal politics play a huge role in the way that the navigation of them, that you can't avoid it. It exists. And so
Yep.
it matter the way that you really exercise your muscle on how to understand the players at stake and the influence that it conjures up, the better and more successful you'll be, especially in larger organizations. This is really a big dynamic in larger organizations. So as a leader, recognizing that your team needs you to be the one that clears out the obstacles for them. That is how, these are things that are not really spoken about. We need
Right.
more people to step up to clear that obstacle for your employees and your individuals. So yeah, that's my
And
last one.
awesome. And you spoke about this a little bit, Yanni, to put a really tactical point on it.
Mhm.
If you give somebody a project to do that's going to require help from people in other parts of the organization, and if you want this project to be a high priority,
Mhm.
then make some phone calls to the
Right.
people that they're going to have to go to and say, Yanni is going to be coming to you for your help with this.
Right.
I want you to make this a priority.
Right. Right. And
Um,
I will just say, as a part B to that, and what you just said, Aaron, is the fact that allow your team members to shine in their expertise.
mm,
Because a lot of times, and this is what happens with the way of clearing obstacles. A biggest obstacle that I see in larger organizations is that a superior sees a subordinate in a very different light versus a peer-to-peer, right?
mhm.
So when you're a leader in an organization, you have somebody like an implementer that it has a specialty, whether it's the CRM implementation or whatever it is, right? Say, they're asking you, your peer is asking you a question about something that somebody else on your team. Don't be the one that needs to know, has to respond. Say, actually, so
Yeah.
and so is the expert. I have no idea. So and so is the expert on that. To pivot that, to fostering their expertise, but also to decreasing the reliance on you to know every single thing that's going on. Right. So enabling your team and enabling really the way that you show up and show out for others, enabling them to see the other person as the expert, really lifts them up and again clears the obstacles for them.
All right.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Well, folks, before I get to my final suggestion for you today, again, I'm Aaron Schmookler, and I'm the only Aaron Schmookler on LinkedIn. So
Oh, that's great.
here's one way to think about. I bet you're the only Yanni San Luis
I
too.
am. I'm definitely the only Yanyn. I have met other Yanins, but definitely only Yanni San Luis. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, there are lots of Aarons on LinkedIn, but and a few Schmooklers, but only one Aaron Schmookler. So one of the times that you might think about reaching out to us, I'm reminded by the experience of a client recently who let one of her senior leaders go for not performing, and what she's discovered since he's left are all of these problems that have kind of been, like, I think about it as like he was the refrigerator, and she moved the refrigerator out of the kitchen, and there are all these little cockroaches
Oh.
underneath the refrigerator. And she's learning about all these problems that he knew about, but there are also problems that other leaders in the organization knew about. So
Hmm.
if you find yourself, with somebody having gone, and there are lots of problems that are showing their faces now that that person is gone, or if you find that there are problems that are arriving at your desk and you're asking the question, why didn't I know about this earlier? I promise you that the answer is because of your culture. That's why. So those are great reasons to reach out to me, and I'm just happy to talk to you about what might be keeping those cockroaches hidden, those little bugaboo problems in your organization. So, having said that, here's my final suggestion about putting your money where your mouth is so that you can keep your people, has to do with culture. If you find yourself characterizing your culture at all, right? If you use your culture as a selling point, if you are proud of your culture, systematize it.
Hmm.
right? I think of your culture as your culture is the behaviors in your organization. I've heard people say, and this is kind of heartbreaking at times, your culture is defined by the worst behaviors permitted in your company. Ooh.
Ooh, yes.
um,
Oh,
and one of our
mm,
absolutely one of my favorite clients right now, Text Expander, they reached out to us because they have a fantastic culture with 30 or 40 employees. And what the CEO of Text Expander said to me was, we have a great culture because we've done an incredible job of hiring. What he knows is that's not scalable, right? As they grow in size, and they're planning to double and triple in size over the course of the next few years, that's not scalable. Having a fantastic culture, in other words, having only fantastic behaviors in your organization by hiring well, is not scalable. You need a system, just like you have a system for this is how we onboard clients, this is how we onboard customers, this is how we deliver our services, this is how we make our product. You need to have a system for your culture so that your culture is not sterile, not uniform, but consistent.
mhm,
Right? When you go into an In-N-Out burger, you know what the culture is because it's consistent from one In-N-Out burger to the other. If you'll pardon me, Starbucks used to be that way and no longer is.
mm,
And part of a systematizing your culture is another system that I think, a subsystem inside your culture that I think is missing from a lot of organizations, is a system for managing people. This is how we manage people around here. If you don't have a system for management, then if somebody moves from one team to another, then their experience of what it's like to work in your company is going to be drastically different. So systematize your management. What are the behaviors of management? Step one, step two, step three. What repeats? How often? Make it a system and systematize your culture in general. How do we behave around here? Not only by principle, but by behavior specifically. So that's my final thought.
oh, I love that. I have to say the behavior one, I love the measure of your culture is the worst allowable offense because
Oh,
because
oh,
I just ooh, like I can already think about really bad things of
right.
other companies and cultures that we've dealt with. But I really I love the expectation of what can be because as in the expect sharing the expectation of what your system for managing people is,
Mm,
right? I think for us, one of our culture, and it's interesting because it's not enough, Aaron, to your point, it's not enough to just have your values and your mission. That's not enough. Like, how are you actually living and breathing those values and missions? And does anybody
yes.
even know them
How do you
inside?
operationalize your values?
Right.
If they don't,
Exactly.
if they're not operationalized, folks,
Hmm.
I'm
Right.
here to tell you, they're not actually your values.
Right. Right, absolutely. And that's the other thing is like for me, I'd be the first one and this is just by no means am I perfect in any regard and I at all. I am
Sure
very
you are.
very flawed individual and I think that part of I would say if you were to ask my team members is I'm the first one to say okay, we have a goal or whatever is not and if I don't hit it, we'd be like I'll say, we're off track or hey, I effed up here or whatever it is and like holding like that's like I think about immediately in my own culture when you just said that I thought wow how can I ensure that that management expectation
Mm,
is permeating throughout the organization and it's really a matter of how they're living by it right and it's so interesting for us to be able I think that this is the other thing is that it's so easy to pick out cultural habits, the ones that we like and the ones that we don't like for
mm.
other major organizations and corporations, right? It's very easy. You're like, oh, I
Looking
love
at you,
this
Wells
service.
Fargo.
Yeah. Right. It's like it's very easy. Like the things, oh, look at what they did or what they didn't do or whatever it is. And here's how I see it too. Whether you are a small organization, right, and small can be defined by revenue or by size of the employee base,
Mhm.
or you're large. What does it matter to not get this started sooner, rather than later? Like what kind of revenue stream do you have to hit for you to think through that you have to have this in place? Why not start living in it from the beginning, right?
Yes.
And creating that, right? So it's interesting because I challenge business owners all the time, especially small business owners in the circles that I operate under. And I think to myself, it's like, just because you're a small business owner doesn't mean that you don't have to have the way, your own code of conduct of the way that your clients, what they have to measure to work with you, right? Why does it always have to be the other way around? And
Yep.
so anyway, it just gave me pause in the way that you brought that up, and the way that you're setting expectations with your clients and the people that work with you.
Well, Yanni, thank
Mhm.
you so much for joining me for what I think has been a fun
It's been
and
fun.
really important conversation.
Yes, lots of topics that we can totally go off into, with relation to employee happiness and how we get better in the workplace. But hopefully, it's given everyone here and those of you who are listening to it later on, a moment of pause, but also a moment of just thinking on how you're going to implement some of these things within your own organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just leave you with one last thought, which is I know, especially, excuse me, Yanni talked about this being an employee's market, and especially in an employee's market, most companies are thinking, I can't compete with the big boys, right? I can't compete with the Microsoft. I can't
Mhm.
compete with Facebook. I can't compete with major manufacturer over here.
Right.
And what we've been talking about, Yanni, is how you can compete, right?
Correct.
That your company is still small enough, very likely,
Hmm.
that you can make this not just an isolated pocket company, but you can make these suggestions that we've made a global, you can make these things true across your entire organization and improve your brand as an employer, not only to the potential employees that you haven't hired yet, but to the folks who are drawing a paycheck from you today.
Right. Absolutely. You're not moving. I mean, even larger organizations can make some of these changes still, but it would take so much
Yeah.
longer
Yeah.
to approve all those changes before you, as a middle market business organization, nonprofit organization, um, can do those things, right? And it really starts with consistency. I have to continue to harp on it because that's where the core of everything is how are you showing up, but how are you being consistent
And
with
it
these
doesn't
things?
have to be as hard or as time consuming or as expensive as you think.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. We better wrap it up there. We're coming up on the hour. And Yanni, it's really been a pleasure. I hope you'll join me for another one of these sometime soon.
Absolutely. I'm there for you.
And she's there for you too.
And you too. Yeah.
Bye, folks.
Bye, everyone.